Hey folks, how you doing? My name's Dave McRae. Now, before you comment, please listen to the whole video so you know exactly where I stand and what my position is. Now look, I get it. Some of you are probably going to say, well, who cares if Art the Clown isn't a mainstream pop culture icon? He's a horror icon. Well, the reason why I think people do care is because they keep comparing him to genuine pop culture icons like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, or Michael Myers. So I do think it's relevant and important that we make the distinction if we want to talk about Art the Clown and his rising stardom. Has he reached that legendary status like Freddy, Jason, or Michael? I mean, really, that is the question, right? That's what, people like to talk about with this kind of thing. Well, here's where I stand on this. And I think it's a very nuanced discussion. I've often said on this channel that for something to be truly iconic, it has to pass a kind of pop culture litmus test, if you will. It's not just about box office numbers or fandom buzz. It's about becoming part of the popular culture. Something that defines an era. You see, Art's ascent feels a little manufactured, not just by the studios necessarily. I mean, Damien Leone's passion is definitely real, but by a growing hunger in horror culture to crown a new icon. People want the next Freddy or Jason so badly, they're rushing to anoint someone who hasn't put in the cultural mileage yet. Icons don't just appear. They grow, evolve, survive missteps, and eventually become symbols. Art is still very young in that journey. He's knocking on its door. He's trying to bang it down, and people are paying attention. There's no doubt about it. But he still hasn't embedded himself into the larger cultural psyche yet. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking, yeah, but Dave, what about that $90 million at the box office for Terrifier 3 on a $2 million budget? Look, that is unbelievable. That is undeniable success. But we also have to consider why people showed up. You see, it wasn't necessarily because Art is a beloved, emotionally resonant character. It was the gimmick, the shtick, the promise of next-level gore, the taboo of seeing that on the big screen. It was the viral shock factor. In many ways, the franchise functions like a haunted house or a carnival ride. You go in for the experience and the spectacle, and once it's over, you talk about how crazy and wild it was. But that doesn't mean you care about the character in a lasting cultural sense. Look, that kind of gimmick and shtick is powerful, but it's not always sustainable. Art may not have the general audience rewatchable charm that Freddy or even Ghostface has. His draw is rooted in extremes, not necessarily emotion or mythos. That can limit how far he travels outside the genre. People went to Terrifier 3 to see something, not necessarily to connect with something. And that's a big distinction when we're talking about icon status and legacy. Now, another thing you might be thinking is, yeah, but Dave, I've seen a lot of kids dress up as Art the Clown for Halloween. I've got 2 bobbleheads, an action figure, a couple of t-shirts, and he was in that music video. And I went to Spirit Halloween, and there he is, he's everywhere. Well, remember, that's a bit of a false equivalence. Just because Art the Clown has merchandise and he's popular doesn't automatically mean he's in the same league as Freddy, Jason, or Michael. Cultural saturation isn't about some people dressing up as the character or having some merchandise. It's about ubiquity. It's about the character being so embedded in the pop culture consciousness that they are everywhere and that everybody knows their face and name regardless of whether you've seen the movie or not. I think it's also important to remember that characters can become huge, very popular, extremely well known without necessarily crossing the threshold of their own genre into the pop culture zeitgeist. I mean, even beloved horror villains like Pinhead or Pumpkinhead and even Leatherface to a degree, while extremely popular and respected, didn't break into the mainstream in the same ways that Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, or Jason Voorhees have. People know of them, absolutely, but you don't see Pinhead on kids' Halloween costumes in the same way you might see a Freddy or Jason. Their imagery didn't saturate pop culture to the same degree. That's the difference between being a fan favorite and being a cultural icon. I'll leave you with this. What Terrifier and Art the Clown have done for horror is terrific. There's no denying the franchise's success or Art's rising popularity. But I also think it's important that we always do our best to look at these things through the lens of perspective. Popularity doesn't always equal legacy, and hype doesn't always translate to long-term cultural impact. Celebrating something new doesn't mean we have to crown it a classic overnight. Sometimes the best thing we can do for the genre and for conversation is to take a step back, appreciate the moment, and ask, is this a wave or is it the beginning of a tide? My name's Dave McRae. Cheers.